Welcome to Notorious Crafts. In this video, I will show you how you can make miniature Lego blocks using two different methods. The first one will be using resin, and then the second one will be using polymer clay. The first method that I will show you will be using resin, which are these ones right here. I'll also go over the pros and cons of using resin versus polymer clay. To make the Lego blocks, you are going to need this silicone mold of different sized blocks. And I have links for this mold as well as all of the supplies that I'm using in this video down below in the description. I also have my crafting resin as well as different colored resin dyes. And I got them in an opaque color so that they would end up looking solid and not clear. And to mix the resin, I have this silicone mixing cup as well as a wooden stir. I'm also going to use these rubber gloves so that the resin doesn't end up on my fingers. I also have the silicone mat in case some of the resin spills over. The first thing that I did was get my resin into my silicone mixing cup. I noticed that there was quite a bit of air bubbles on the surface, so I just grabbed my heat gun and just went over the surface to remove some of those air bubbles. And then I grabbed my red resin dye and just put a few drops in and then mixed it all together. Now that my resin is fully mixed together, I am using a toothpick to gently place the resin into my silicone mold. The slots for these blocks are so small, a toothpick is my best option so that I don't get the resin all over the place. So if you have a toothpick or something even thinner, that is your best option. All right, this is going to take a while, so let's just fast forward through this whole process so that we can get this whole entire silicone mold filled up with some of our resin. After filling up the entire mold, I flipped it over to the other side to make sure I didn't have any air pockets, and I noticed a lot of the resin did not get inside some of the little holes. I tried to use a toothpick to push the resin down into them, but I think my resin is just a little too thick. So with the second mold that I have, I am first filling up these tiny little holes using a toothpick and then just placing the resin directly into the holes. That way they're getting filled up right away. And then I'm going to put my layer of resin on top. And once I had the molds filled up, I placed them under my LED light so that they can cure and harden. It's also important to use clear silicone molds if you are resin that requires curing through LED light. If you use a solid colored mold, some of the light might not get through all the way and your resin might not harden. My resin has cured and these blocks are fully hardened, so now it's time to take them out of the mold. I really like how shiny they look. They look like real Legos. They actually look like they are made from plastic. As I started taking some of them out, I noticed that a lot of them ended up with quite a few air bubbles. If you can see that, I know it's really tiny, but a good amount had air bubbles. I guess I did not take a lot of them out, and the final finish, there are quite a few air bubbles. I'm not too happy about that. At least they're not too visible. And here are some of the bigger blocks. You can see where the resin did not go in all the way. These were the ones where I did not put in the resin inside of the holes first thing. But some of these other ones are looking much better, so I am very happy with these other ones. Here's a close-up of all of the Lego blocks made with resin. You can see some of the holes, but from far away you can't really see them. I am a perfectionist, so they do bother me, but if you want to make a lot of them very quickly, using resin is a good way to make them. Next, I'll show you how you can make the Lego blocks using polymer clay. I have this large variety pack from Sculpey, and it has a large variety of colors, which will be perfect for making a colorful Lego set. But for purposes of this video, and just to keep everything consistent, I'm going to use the red so that it's easy to compare side by side next to the resin ones that I made. I'm only taking out a pinch of clay. You don't need too much of it to fill up the mold. I'm warming it up now in my fingers just to soften up the clay. I'm also adding in just a small drop of clay softener just to help soften up the clay a little bit, and it'll fit better inside of the mold. You do not want to add too much clay softener since it'll make your clay very brittle after you bake it. I'm using a toothpick to fill up each of the block holes. I'm also using the toothpick to push the clay and just really compact it so that it fills up the mold completely. After my first one was done, I noticed that the little tiny holes at the bottom were not getting filled completely, even after really trying to compact the clay. So I'm doing the same thing that I did with the resin and just filling up each hole individually with clay. This process does take a long time and it is quite a bit tedious. I notice that filling up the molds with the clay does take a lot longer than using resin. So if you're short on time, then I would actually recommend using resin instead of clay if you want to get this done faster. All right, this is taking a long time to fill up, so let's just fast forward and get this filled up. And I'm just going to check the other side to make sure that there are no air pockets before I put this in the oven. I'm going to preheat my oven to 275, and once it gets to that temperature, I'm going to place the mold with the clay inside and let the clay bake inside of the mold. After it was done baking, I took it out and let it cool for about 30 minutes, and now it is ready to take out of the mold. I knew these are really tiny and hard to see, but I love how these turned out. I like the color so much better than the red resin mold. It could just be because the red resin mold wasn't as strong of a red, but I really like how this color turned out much better. Granted, it's not as shiny as the resin, but I could always cover it in some sort of a glaze to make it shinier and to look more of like a Lego. On this block that I took out, some of the clay got stuck inside of the hole. It didn't quite adhere to the rest of the Lego block. Hopefully the rest of the blocks do not turn out like that. I'll just need to remember for next time to press in the clay a little bit harder so that the clay in the hole adheres to the rest of the block. And here are the resin ones on the left side, and then the blocks made from polymer clay are on the right side, so you can see them side by side. As you can see, some of the resin ones have some holes. The holes actually did not get filled in all the way. My resin had some air bubbles, so they did not come out perfect, but I love how shiny they are. The polymer clay aren't as shiny. I could always glaze them. And in this section, I put the resin on top and the polymer clay on the bottom so you can get a better view of them. The resin does look a little bit warped, whereas the polymer clay blocks look a little bit better filled out. Like they look more like squares. And I think that's just because the resin is a liquid, so it just filled in the mold. Whereas with the polymer clay, I really packed the clay in there. So I just think that the polymer clay ones look just a little bit better. I think I might end up using something to glaze them, maybe some clear resin to glaze them. And here's just a close-up so that you can see a resin one of just how warped it looks and how all of the holes did not get filled out. One benefit of using resin is that the overall finish does look better and it does look more of like a Lego, and it is a lot faster to fill up the mold using resin than polymer clay. I hope that this was helpful for you guys and it'll help you with trying to make some decisions if you guys want to use resin or clay, and that this was a good comparison. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel, and see you guys in the next video.